So hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Ciaran Quinn. I'm the Research Support Librarian here in Maynooth University Library. So I'm just going to talk a bit about the supports as well as the library offers in terms of early career researchers. And I suppose I'm going to use this as an opportunity to showcase kind of what I do and generally the areas that I can help you with. If you have any questions, feel free, but I'm sure we'll have time at the end for questions anyway, if you want to hold them until then. But if anything kind of urgent comes up, do feel free to ask me and I'm sure I'll be able to help you out. So going to start off. So these are roughly the areas that I would look after. So things like, research resources, the resources you can use. I would do a lot of training in advanced database searching. So you should probably know most databases, there's kind of a basic way of using them. And then there's more advanced ways, including command line searching. So there'll be a lot of kind of tips and tricks I can show you around doing a more effective search. I also help people with reviews, particularly literature reviews, systematic reviews, scoping reviews. Reference management tools in Maynooth, we have EndNote Desktop and EndNote Online, so I'd train people in that, and I'd also support them in tools like Zotero and Mendeley. Data management planning, so I would provide training in data management planning, and we also have a data management librarian who will help you review your data management plans. I'd advise on academic publishing, so things like where to publish, where's the best journal to publish in. Open access publishing, I'd advise on the benefits of that. And there's also a number of article processing agreements, which I'll deal with, which are, I suppose, agreements that will waive the open access or the article processing charging fees if you wanted to publish your paper open access. Scholarly communication, that's generally how to promote your papers, how to get them out there. I'd look at research profiles, which are things like ORCID profiles, profiles on the Scopus database, Web of Science database. And the idea of those is it's, I suppose, a place where you can go to where all your publications are listed, and they'll issue you with an identity number, which you can then use when you're applying for funding or just promoting yourself generally. I'm going to talk just quickly about measuring your research impact as well. So that's, things like your H-index, which will become clear later on. I'll tell you all about that. And just to be able to show, how prominent your research is, what kind of interest it's getting, and so on. And I'm just going to mention as well, I do accredited training as well, with the GST2 modules, which are modules for PhD students, but academics can audit them as well. And they would deal with a wide range of research-related topics. Okay. Now, more generally, to support, I suppose, those kind of topics, I'd offer one-to-one consultations where obviously you can come in and meet me and I can go through your particular research issue with you and try and help you if I can. I'd also organize group trainings. That could be you and your friends, small groups, or I do it by department level or bigger level, whatever is required. I also go along to the research committee meetings, so they're for the faculties, and I would input into those. I do lunchtime training sessions, which are actually starting in November, and they will be kind of quick, half an hour across a range of different topics. I'd also do longer workshops and seminars, often during the summer or Easter break. I'd also speak, as I'm doing today, say Research Week or Love Data Week, and then I'd record a lot of stuff with online guides and recordings that you can use. So I suppose the idea is to try and, I suppose, reach you wherever you are and try to tap into what your research needs will be. Okay, so this is the one I mentioned. This is the lunchtime workshop, say, for example, coming up in November. And they're starting on the 3rd of November and run through to the 15th of December. And you'll see that in the events page on the library homepage, full listing of all the different sessions that are on. So it's things like it's searching, it's reference management, it's data management, research impact, publishing, all those kind of topics that you might find useful. So I also produce guides. This is my listing of the research guides I have, and you'll find these in the library homepage under guides as well. So you can see there like a whole range of topics, and I try and keep those up to date as possible, covering again things like academic integrity, publishing, impact, open access, reference management, scholarly communication, writing your thesis, and so on. If there's any topics not there that you think would be worth putting into a guide, feel free to contact me and I'll be happy to put something together. Yeah, see that there's something I've missed. And this is the Senior 1 Early Career Researchers Guide, which covers a lot of what I'm going to talk about today. And that's available in that listing as well. Okay. And this is our YouTube. So we've channeled the Research Skills and Resources Toolbox. And in that one at the moment, I have a number of recordings. So these are on sessions I was doing on Altmetrics Explorer, which I'll mention shortly. But what Altmetrics Explorer does is it measures the attention that your papers get. So whereas you might use, say, a citation tracking database like Web of Science or Scopus to find the citations your papers are getting, Altmetrics Explorer will get other attention. So it can be social media attention, blogging attention, any kind of discussions about your papers online, it'll flag those there. And that's great, especially for your early career, because you mightn't necessarily have a lot of citations, but you could certainly show maybe the amount of attention your research is getting, which is great, obviously, for the research you're doing. The funders would be interested in that, but also for any future funding you're going for. Also going for jobs, you can show, despite maybe you're new to publishing and you're not getting the huge impact yet, that there is a lot of traction in your papers. So it's great to be able to show that. And then these are just other ones we did there on different lit reviews, search strategies, referencing, and so on. So lots of these little short recordings that you can just pop into to upskill yourself in any of those topics. And you'll see actually the metrics one, the first two are kind of general, how to use it, and the bottom two that are more specific. So there's one on how to create reports for your CV or funding applications, and then generally how to make it work for you. Because there's a bit of work that goes into Autometrics Explorer where you have to kind of, I suppose, structure your online output so it will be found and incorporated into these tools. Okay, so just the research resources then. I'll shrink that down a bit. So the library has a huge range of resources. I think it's close. I think it's about 220 something databases, or 320 something databases. So lots of databases, and they cover a huge range of topics and different types of databases. So you'd have one, say, that would be primary sources. So it could be something like Dublin Castle papers, parliamentary papers, that kind of thing. They'd be all primary sources. Secondary sources, as you'd expect, so they'd be the database that would have a lot of full text scholarly academic articles. We'd also have a lot of newspaper databases, reports, dissertations, huge range of subjects. The rough, I suppose, division in types then would be, there would be I suppose, databases that would deal maybe by subject area, and they would tend to have a lot of full text in them. There would be then bibliographic databases that would more track a huge range of topics, wouldn't necessarily have the full text, but would be hugely searchable. It would track citations as well. So very, very useful resource. But again, any queries about the resources we have, feel free to contact us. And that subject guide is very useful as well. Very easy to just navigate through it, filter them down by subject areas and so on. So definitely worth a look at that. But again, if you want more specific advice, how to search in any of them, how to dig into them at a deeper level, feel free to contact us. Okay, then the Maynooth Archive, another very useful resource. And actually, those of you who are doing PhDs, this is where your PhDs will end up when you deposit them at the end of your research. So as it stands, it's a really good resource for looking at previous PhDs and research masters, and they're all full text, and they would be in there from roughly 2011 or so when the mandate came in. So I'd really advise you to have a look at that. And it's also a repository for academics' papers. So a lot of the academics will put in their papers in there, and also things like reports, newspaper articles, even some posters from conferences. So very useful resource, huge range of topics, and it's all full text. So if you put your papers in there, you're going to get a huge amount of traction on them. People anywhere in the world can go into them and read your papers. So definitely advise you have a look at that, both as a possible repository for your work, but also as a really good source for papers. Just to mention individual on the SAGE Research Methods Core, very useful database. It's not, I suppose, a holder of academic papers. Actually, the idea of this one is to actually help you with your research. So for example, it'll help you to plan out your whole research project. The content is a mixture of books, short videos, different types of material to support you in that. Really good for if you wanted to get different tools for data, methodologies, all that sort of things. So I'd really advise you to have a look at SAGE Research Methods Core. Very useful tool. So advanced database searching. So this is something I quite commonly offer training, because I find a lot of researchers that use maybe the basic search box, which is fine to some extent, particularly if you're more experienced and you know how to structure a search. Because the advanced searching bit will give you a much more structured search. So it'll provide different boxes so you can actually combine your searches using your and, your ors, and just have a more structured search. You can also, with these databases, use a lot of so it's useful tools, like you can do things like proximity searching, truncation, stemming, that kind of thing. For any of you, it's just maybe something like stemming. The example of that would be, you could say you wanted all words beginning in org, so organized, organizational. You just put org asterisks in. You can also do proximity searching with some of them if you wanted to say one word within 5 words of another word. You could do that. So there's lots of kind of additional things you can do with the databases, even down to, you can set up your own profile in them, save your search histories, set alerts, rerun your searches. So there's a lot of extra stuff I can show you with those databases, just so you kind of maximize the value you get out of them. So some of them listed there. So you plan your search strategies, keywords, free text, subject headings, command line searches, which some of you might use, particularly if you're doing a systematic review. And they would be in databases like Scopus, Web of Science, sociological abstracts. And the idea of that is you structure the search completely yourself. So rather than relying on a predefined search from the database, you would actually put in all the commands yourself. So it's a very kind of rigorous way of developing a search. So I can advise you on that if that's something you want to do, but that's particularly one that would be used in systematic reviews. And then search strings, so using connectors, truncation, wildcards, proximity searching. A wildcard would be, say, alternative spelling. So you could, for example, if you were, say organization with a Z or an S, you could put a question mark in it. It'll pick up both variations of that, women with an E or an A, that kind of idea, and then saving searches and alerts. So happy to provide any training or support in that. Reviewing the literature. So this is a very common one I get asked about. There's people who's doing a whole range of different types of lit reviews. So there will be the traditional one that you would have done before, probably, doing a master's or even undergraduate, more generalist review. But as it progresses, they can get a lot more rigorous. So people, for example, would use scoping reviews and rapid reviews, systematic reviews, and they're quite different things. So the systematic review would be, I suppose, the most rigorous end of things. And that would typically, I suppose, traditionally been used in maybe medical sciences. So if you wanted to, check out a particular intervention, for example, does the use of anodine help somebody with a heart condition, for example, and you would put together kind of top team, people who'd be interested in that, and they would do a really systematic search to, try and answer that question. So it'd be very, very structured, down to, you want to know exactly, obviously, what is your search string, what terminologies are you going to use, what ones are you not going to use, what databases are you searching, which ones are you not searching, why are you not going to search them, and so on. So at any point, you can go back and see exactly how that person has conducted that search. And they tend to be within certain guidelines. So for example, the protocols involved in Cochrane or Campbell. Cochrane would be more sciences, Campbell would be more social sciences. And you'd follow to the letter exactly the protocols within those. And systematic reviews are something I would help people with. I don't, I suppose, tend to be on the team doing the systematic review, but I would certainly advise people at every stage of it. Now, the scoping and rapid reviews are a bit different. So the scoping review is still quite rigorous, but the idea of that is just to scope out the literature, see what's out there, but you would have certain principles of kind of a systematic approach in it. The rapid review is just, as it suggests, it's just a quick review of the literature. Not as rigorous, and it's really, again, just for you to kind of dip into the literature and just see what's out there, see if your question has been answered, what papers are out there. Okay, so they're just different degrees, different terminology, but the big difference, it really is the difference between the lit review and the systematic review. And you'd often actually see papers that are put out there being called systematic reviews, but they're not actually systematic reviews. But they are being systematic, but they wouldn't be following the kind of protocols you'd find in Cochrane or Campbell. But and actually, as an academic, that's a very popular thing to publish because they tend to get a lot of interest. Other researchers would find them really useful, so they tend to get quite high readership and good citation levels. So it's probably something worth doing as a researcher and getting involved in. So the reference management tools, just quickly. So the one Maynooth would subscribe to is EndNote. For those of you who aren't familiar with reference management tools, the idea of them is you kind of create your own library. So as you find your research, you can export it into your reference management tool and save the bibliographic details in there. You can also save the full text in there. And then there's a little plugin you can download into your Word document. And that then allows you to use those references to create your in-text citations, your footnotes, your bibliographies in your papers in a huge variety of styles. So really, really handy tool. You're kind of creating your bibliography, your citations in real time as you write your paper. It'll also allow you to format them for specific journal titles. So, you just go into whatever journal title you want to publish for, and it'll format the document into that style. Aside from that, then it's also a very good place just to have your own library that you can store your bibliographic records, attach the full text to those documents. Once you have the full text in, you can annotate the PDFs, so you can, highlight sections, put notes in. You can create collaborative groups for projects you're working on. So you can all, for example, share your papers to the one group, which is really useful. Put your comments in, that kind of thing. You can contact other academics through them as well. So, very useful tool. If you're not using one, I'd really advise you to use one. You'll find it a really handy tool. It save you an awful lot of time in, formatting your references, but also it provides you with a really good resource for your research. And because we have the desktop version, you can access it offline. So you can just go straight into your articles without having to go in online, which is very handy. And you can have it on a few different devices as well. So highly recommend that one. And I should say it comes in an online version as well. So you'd never be without your references. You can pop in on your desktop or online. Again, this one, we do training regularly in the library in that, or you can just contact me and I can do some training with you on that. It's data management planning. So I would do a lot of individual consultations, and it's typically, I suppose my bit would be, explain to you about what is data management planning, what's involved in it, what are the components, how to do it, why it's a good thing to do. Like we'd know at the moment that a lot of funders would demand that a data management plan is part of the conditions of the funding, but it's also just really good practice, good research practice to have a data management plan, no matter what research you're doing, whether you're, publishing or not. I would definitely advise you to use a plan, and I would do training seminars on that. And there's also an accredited module, the GST2 module, Research Skills Development Program, that you can do on data management planning. And we've recently acquired a data management librarian, Frank Callahan. So he's doing a data management plan review service at the moment as well. So, if you are getting funding and part of your funding is to have a data management plan, he'll be the guy to contact there, and he'll bring you through that whole process. He'll review your plan as you go along just to make sure it's on target. Because you'll find when you are required to do a data management plan, the funders will tend to have, a policy on that, and they'll point you to the guides that they follow. So it's useful to get some advice on that as you progress that. Okay, so academic publishing. So I suppose my bit on that is, I was asked questions about, where should I publish? And I suppose your decisions around that can be based around maybe even where you want to publish. Is there a journal of note you want to publish in? But it could equally be, what is the highest ranking journal in my field? What is the top impact journal? How do I identify that? And I can help you with that. There are databases that will help you do that. And there's lots of kind of ins and outs to it, and I suppose tips and tricks of improving your chances of getting published. And then once you are published, you want to be sure that people are finding your paper and citing you. So there's a few, I suppose, areas I can cover with that can help you out with that. And then once it is out there, how do you improve your research visibility? How do you disseminate your research? It's great to get published, but what you also want is people to actually find your papers and to be able to interact with them and cite them in their own papers, which of course is great because that'll build your profile, it'll build your department's profile, it'll build the university's profile. So this is all good. So there's a lot of advice I can give you on that. And you'll see that in the guides I mentioned at the beginning as well on academic publishing. Okay. Open research, we have a number of guides on that, a few different aspects on that. So there's the options will be generally there I will cover. So the benefits of open access. And of course, the key benefit of that is it's open to everybody. It's not behind a paywall. Anybody can read your paper, which is very democratic. And also from your point of view, it gets your readership up, and therefore you should get your citations up. Okay. And the other thing we do is open access agreements. These are agreements that we have with publishers. So the idea that previously, if you wanted your paper to be published open access, you would have to pay a fee. And these would be for journals that would be behind paywalls. So what they do now is for certain journals, once you publish with them and you're the corresponding author, the fee will be waived. And you can find the full listings of those in the guides as well, or you can just get in touch with the library and we can help you with that. So you can come directly to me or just email open access in the library. Again, I can advise you on who to contact for that, but well worth taking advantage of that. There's also options now to publish open access. There's a new guide up on that. So if you wanted to think about actually, maybe creating a digital publication to publish your papers open access, you can do that. I've just put, obviously that should be predatory publishers. That's something that I will talk about a bit as well, because they were always there, but particularly now in the era of open access, there's an awful lot of predatory publishers out there who are basically trying to get your papers. And the usual, I suppose, selling point is they'll try and they'll publish your papers really quickly for a small fee. But you'd really want to be careful with them. The quality of them isn't great, and really all they're trying to do is just collect information, collect articles that they can make money out of. And you'd see that as well. Often if you speak at a conference, they'll email you directly, or they might invite you to different conferences. because they'll host conferences as well. Just be careful around that. If you're not sure about the title, and again, in the guide I have, there will be various tools that will help you check out the various journal titles and just see if they are legitimate titles. And open data as well, depositing of open data, that's something we can help you with as well. But there isn't actually a Maynooth open data repository at the moment, but it's something we're working on, but we can certainly advise you on, what would be a suitable repository to put your data into to make it accessible. Because again, that can be often part of funding as well, that your data has to be available. So we can advise you on that. So scholarly communication, I mentioned that at the beginning. This is kind of the broad range of, I suppose, getting your work out there. So again, this is a guide I have, and it's going to talk to you about, publication cycle, what is scholarly communication, publishing in academic journals, predatory publishers, author identities. I'm going to come to that again in a second. Data management, visibility, tracking research publication citations, and so on. Research funding, that's a link into the, where to get some funding, and then guidelines of Maynooth University's identity in academic publications and grant applications. That's kind of important, that you're consistent in your identity, which again, I'll come on to that in a minute. Whether it's, what you call Maynooth University and what you call yourself, that idea that you have to be consistent in your identity. Okay, so curating and improving your research profile. So when you publish a paper, obviously you're keen for people to find it, and what will happen with it is it'll be curated and indexed into various different academic databases. So for example, Scopus, which you may have used, which is a big bibliographic database, multidisciplinary, owned by Elsevier. And as your papers are collated in there, they will assign you a Scopus identity number. Okay, and the idea of that is you can click on that identity number, and then it'll give you a listing of all the publications you have with them. So very useful if you wanted to put that maybe under your email address or on your website, or if you're applying for funding. And the great thing about Scopus is you can actually go in there and you can check out your ID, and it could be that you could have multiple identities in there, and it'll allow you to merge your IDs to make sure the papers actually belong to you, because ideally what you want is kind of a go-to location that people can go to and find as many of your papers as possible under one ID, rather than being kind of divided up all over the place. And the reason they might be divided up would be things like if you have, say, multiple author identities, and that can arise, for example, you have a double-barreled name. Sometimes you use initials, sometimes you don't. You have a married name, you have a single name, you have, very different reasons. So I really advise you, especially early on, just pick your identity, pick what your author identity is and just stick with that. Okay, it just makes things easier for people trying to track your paper. Web of Science would be similar. Theirs would be called Researcher ID. It was called Publons for a while there, but it's back to being called Researcher ID now. And again, number is assigned, your papers are attached to it. They can be different, these two, because obviously they're different databases, so they have a different range of your papers. Okay, this is where ORCID comes in, and Maynooth subscribes to ORCID, but it's also a free tool that you can use. And the idea of ORCID is you sign up with ORCID, they give you an ORCID ID number, and then you control your profile in it. So it's a bit of software, so you can put in obviously your normal personal details, you can put in your education, your career to date, your funding, and you can also attach your papers. So the great thing about ORCID is it's a place you can control. So you can attach all your publications in there. So at least here's one place where somebody can go into and find all my output. Okay, and again, that's an ID number that you can use when you're applying for funding or jobs or whatever it happens to be. So I'd really promote that, which is really worthwhile doing that. And also along with that, the RIS system as well, which I don't have there, but the research information system, if you're an academic in Maynooth, it's worthwhile, setting your profile up there, attaching your papers to that as well. Google Scholar Citations Profile is another one you can use. And that's obviously with Google, just set up your profile in Google Citations, and then you can pull in all the papers or publications that are in Google Scholar that relate to you. And again, it'll give you a nice little profile, show your number of documents, how they're doing, citations they're getting, and so on. There's also the academic social networks, which are popular with people. So things like ResearchGate, which is a good one for the sciences, academia.edu, Social Science Research Network, Mendeley, all good resources. And what you can do there is you can put your papers up, you can contact other academics. It's nice. It's not fully open access, so just in case you think it's a substitute for open access, it's not. You also have to be careful around copyright. Make sure that you're allowed to put your papers up there. But again, I can advise you more on that if you want to contact me. But these are all worthwhile places to keep an eye on, just to keep an eye on your identity, how you look like out there. When people go looking for your papers, what do you look like? Are your identities consistent? Can people find my papers? And so on. In the case of Scopus, do I need to, I suppose, edit it a bit? Do I need to maybe merge my identities together? Are there papers they've missed that could be attached? We could work with you on that just to get the maximum accuracy, I suppose, into your profile. So that is your researcher profile. So very worthwhile keeping up that. And again, I don't really mention that here, but same as well, if you're doing, if you have a social media profile, it's worth keeping an eye on that, being rigorous, not treating it in a very professional manner. Be careful about what you put up there, because again, that's a great way of promoting your papers. So, you should curate it quite tightly. And again, we can advise you on that if you need help with that. Okay, so showcasing your research impact. So there's a lot of tools that do this. And I might actually just pop out and show you some of these live, but just to mention them. The idea of bibliometrics is effectively what they're doing is they are tracking citations generally. So that would be numbers of citations you're getting for your papers. And from that, they are getting a sense of how important your work is. It would be considered indicative. I mean, as you can imagine, there's issues around citations. It doesn't tell you everything about the quality of a paper, but it does give you a sense of what's important. And they would give you a measure called a H index for that, which is a kind of like an average. So if you had, say, a H index of 50, it means you have at least 50 papers that have been cited 50 times. So it's kind of an average of the numbers of citations you're getting. They'll also use those citations then to, see the importance of an article, the importance of a journal, and so on. So there's a lot of things you can do that. And then from that, you can extrapolate, they'll feed into things like university rankings and so on. Now, the newer version of that is a thing called Autometrics Explorer. So they track citations, but they also track attention scores. So that's the attention your papers are getting in an online environment. So again, who's tweeting you, Facebooking, LinkedIn you, all those different types of tools. Are you being mentioned in patents, in blogs, in newspapers, a whole range of different sources. So it gives you a more kind of, I suppose, qualitative aspect to the impact of your work. So the citations would be a quantitative measure. Autometrics Explorer will get a bit more qualitative, a bit more behind, what's, I suppose, trending out there. What sort of interest are you getting in your papers, which can be very valuable. And you can use the likes of that in your CVs and funding applications. So I might just, let me see. Let me do it. Yeah, I'll just pop that out of that just for 1 second. Hopefully this is going to work for me. So this is Scopus, for example. Okay. So the likes of Scopus will give you some basic details. So if I wanted to say put in, I'm just going to put in an author, for example. Okay, so this guy, Dave Goulson, there's his profile. So that's the kind of thing you'd get. There's his number of documents, his H index, his affiliation. Affiliation, of course, is important, and you need to get advice that there's a specific way of putting your affiliation when you're getting published, because you want to be sure that they can capture that as well. And the research office can advise you on that. But I'll just click into his profile. So there is Dave Goulson. Looks like that. And there is his Scopus number. And there's his ORCID number from his ORCID profile. And you can import that into your Scopus information into ORCID. He can edit his profile. He can set alerts to find if he wants to find out if anybody is, citing his work. He can find potential author matches and so on. And there's his most contributed topics, trends and citations. It's the way you want to see it, going up nicely. There's a number of documents, H index of 79. You'd know he was a scientist, because you notice that the sciences, a lot more publication, a lot more citation going on. It'd be quite different to the humanities in terms of number of citations. So if you're in the humanities, don't be put off by that. It's just different subject areas, different impact. And then there's his articles and then listing. So I could sort them then, for example, by the highest cited. So there's his top cited article, and it's a review. There's a good tip. Reviews are great. They're short, and a lot of people read them. So worth doing it. Good for getting your citation numbers up. There's his citations, like so. Again, I won't dwell to that. If you're interested in that side of things, happy to talk to you about that. Then there's one that works with that thing called SkyVal. If I can just pop into that. And you get into SkyVal by registering with Scopus and then using the same logins. This is what SkyVal looks like. And this does the same citation tracking, but at a higher level again. So this is at a Maynooth level. So this is a summary for Maynooth. Overall research performance, scholarly output, authors, impact. I won't go into it. There's lots of different measures of impact. So field weighted, it just takes into account the subject area. But there's other measures as well. There's Maynooth's share by subject area, nice little graphic. Research topics in Maynooth. Performance indicators, so percentage of journals and top percentiles. international collaborations, top authors in Maynooth, all that kind of stuff. And you could do that if you wanted to, say, for example, look at a different university and just see who's the top people in a certain field. You can do that. I can filter those down by subject area if I wanted to. Very easily done. I can go in, but and there's other places. So that's the overview. I can also benchmark. So if you wanted to, say, benchmark yourself, a university, a group of researchers against each other, against another university, you can do all that kind of stuff. So that's just set for scholarly output, but there's loads of other different measures in there that you can use. So it could be useful for you, a researcher. You could, different groups, if you wanted to look at the gender mix in your department, see what their output, their metrics were like, compare, your department with a similar department in DCU or Trinity, you can do that. There's lots of this different stuff you can do. You can look at collaborations. So who are Maynooth, for example, or your subject area, currently collaborating with. Go back to Maynooth there. So for example, there's your world maps. There's Maynooth's current collaborations, and then you can click down into them and just see, what universities there are. Armenia, for example, and you can pop down in and just have a look at the different institutions there. Very easy to do. Great, for example, if you're interested in, expanding your range of collaborations, or if you wanted to visit a particular university and you wanted to see, who we're currently working with, very easy to just pop around between them. Okay. So that's it. And I say easy to move between them. That's what you want to do. There's Europe again, for example, and you can see that you can just easily just click in and see what's happening, like so. So very useful tool. So there's current, potential collaborations. Pop back to Stanford again there, but anyway, you get the idea. This is what you can do. So there's your current ones, and then there's your potential collaborations. So a good handy tool. So that is SkyVal. And the other one I mentioned there, SkyVal Scopus, what they're doing effectively is measuring citations. But you can also use this tool, which is called Altmetric Explorer. So this is the one Maynooth subscribes to. And what this is doing is tracking research outputs and who's interested in them. So you can see my little links there. There's social media mentions, news and blogs, policies, patents, other sources. Okay. And you've options there. There's the highlights, research outputs, timelines, demographics, mentions, mention sources. So you can look at the sources, for example, if you want to do that. Mentions, journals. So there's some of the top ones. Astronomy, astrophysics, nature, and so on. And that's just at a Maynooth level. You can also go in here. Actually, that's experimental physics. I'll just change that. Yeah. So, but you go into any department you wanted. So, for example, I could go in there and decide I wanted, say, biology. And I could just run a search on that. But you could filter it down then by publishers, funders, types of outputs. If you just wanted articles, books, whatever you want, I'll just run a search. So there's some there for biology. And then I can just go back to highlights for biology. So there's the highlights. And you'll see these little colored kind of sections. And some of you might have seen this actually in Scopus. You'll see this in Scopus as well. And it's going to link into the altmetrics. So I could click into that one, for example, and just see what's happening with that article. So we know it's getting a lot of attention. There's the blogs, news outlets. Then I could go into and just see what's happening in the news, who's picking up on it, what blogs are interested in it, what's happening with it on Twitter. Okay. And you can see if you decide to use this, actually, it's quite a specific way of structured. So they have their tweet here, and then they have the handles of people who think they might be interested, and then a link back to the article itself. So it just makes it easier for people to pick up on it and then retweet you and react to it. And then patents. There's a patent, for example. And dimensions is just citations. This is a citation tool that they use. It's potentially quite useful just if you're interested in, seeing the interest or the traction your papers are getting, worth investigating. And you'll find a link into that on the library A set of databases. You can just go in and have a look at Altmetrics, sign up for an account and play around with it. And again, if you want more information on that, I'm happy to meet people with that and just go through those how to get the most out of it, because it doesn't just pick up everything. There's a way of structuring your outputs to make sure it finds them. Okay, and you can go in, there's listings in there of all the sources it tracks and so on. So I think well worth your while having a look at that. Okay, let's go back to the the show if I can. So again, there's a lot of these tools that you can use just to promote yourself, promote your visibility, and be a lot of other ones as well, like make sure that you share your papers out there, send them on to people you think would be interested. If there's platforms that are interested in your subject area, you can do a lot of that. Making your work findable is things like, for example, having good metadata. If you put, for example, your paper up on the Institutional Problem Issues, good metadata there so they can find your work. When you're writing the actual paper itself, don't go for the complicated title. Have a simple title that maybe matches your keywords, your abstract. Because bearing in mind, most people are searching for these electronically. So I would just pay attention to that, make your work findable. Your author and affiliation, again, make sure that's correct. Keep your author profile up to date. Again, so all your papers are assigned to that identity, and then it makes it easier for people to find all your papers. And I have a guide on that as well that you can make use of. I'll pop these slides up actually when I'm finished as well, so you can have a look at all that. So this is just another thing I wanted to mention: the research skills development programs. These are some of the training sessions I do. And as I mentioned at the beginning, these are ones that if you were doing a PhD, you can decide to attend these, and I think your supervisor just gives you permission to do that. If they decide that it's a suitable course for you to do, and they're accredited, you get your ECT credits for that. So well worth doing those. But also, even if don't want to do it that way, you can come along and just audit the course as well. So the particular bits you wanted to come along to, feel free, just let me know, and I'll give you the contact details, and we can get you to come along to that as well. This semester, they're face-to-face, training room C and D, so you come along to that, and then next semester they'll be online, just to mix it up and give different people an opportunity to come along to them. Okay, so I think that is it.